Hi everyone, I'm Michael Bad Goblin Games. I'm here to talk to you a bit about how we incorporate World War II and sci-fi into the Ages of Conflict system. If you've watched the other videos we've presented, you've really seen that we focused on, ancients and fantasy, and maybe to a lesser degree black powder. Though the rules also support World War II and sci-fi, and so I want to show you a bit about how that works. So the first thing I want to talk about is basically the style of fighting. In the core book, we're including in the core book, we're including ancients, fantasy, and black powder because the style of fighting in those genres is very, very similar. Now, the technology has changed, of course, though the style of fighting was basically the same. So, and what I mean by that is it was dominated by close order or tight formations. You had soldiers marching into battle, more or less shoulder to shoulder. There were some skirmishing formations. There were some loose order formations, slingers, light cavalry, some archers, what have you. Though for the most part, it was close order fighting. That's something that changes when we go to World War II and sci-fi. By default, World War II is sci-fi just because of technological advances with weaponry, and you don't want your soldiers in those packed formations. By default, at that point, everyone is assumed to be a skirmishing unit. So the first rule here is with World War II and sci-fi, all units are considered by default to be skirmishing. The other thing that changes is the tactical unit size. With ancients and fantasy and black powder, the smallest tactical unit size we have is a company. So one base equals a company, and we say that's about 100 soldiers, so that number isn't really important, but it's just a company is the smallest tactical unit size. When we go to World War II and sci-fi, we break that down a bit further, and so we have the smallest tactical unit size being a platoon, and then you can have 4 of these individual bases, and the bases we have here, by the way, are just 25 millimeter circular bases. That's just what we use. So we basically at that point say that 4 of these bases equals a company, and it's really up to you how you issue orders. What we do is if the units are close enough together and you can easily distinguish what company they belong to, then you can use, say, one order for multiple platoons, assuming they're all going to take that same action. If I want to split them off, so even though let's say these really belong to the same company, if I want these 2 platoons to do one action and this platoon to carry out a different action or different order, then I'll issue a different order to that particular platoon. So that's really the first thing that changes at World War II and sci-fi, is that the size of the tactical unit, the smallest tactical unit, I should say, is changing. Now, you've seen again in the other videos we've done, our examples are really dominated with 6mm miniatures, though we do use other sizes. We have 28mm, we have 10, we have 15. We really go down as small as 2 for ours, and up to 28mm miniatures in our games. So again, the scale of the miniature doesn't really matter to us. Now, I will say with, say, World War II and sci-fi, I would recommend staying with smaller miniature sizes, just because Ages of Conflict it's a big battle system. This is made for mass battles, so it can look a little awkward trying to represent, say, a platoon with one 28mm miniature running around. I mean, it'll work. You just you really lose the look and feel of that big battle system. So if you're going to do World War II and sci-fi, I would recommend staying with smaller miniatures, 6, 2, maybe up to 10, but I really wouldn't go any further than that. Because of the technical, basically the technology involved, all of our I shouldn't say all, I should say most of the vehicles, for example, at that point, will have the independent weapon special ability. I have, there's another video that covers some of our special abilities, including independent weapon, and I would recommend you go watch that because I go into that special ability a bit more in depth. But just briefly, what that ability allows you to do is to separate whatever weapons the vehicle has from the order. So typically, for example, if I was to give this unit of infantry charge orders, they could move, but they could not cast any missile weapons they have, for example, okay? With independent weapon, that changes. So now I can give, say, this tank charge orders, and it can charge across the field, right? However, it's with independent weapon, we are still allowing the firing of its cannons. And we're doing that because at this point, most of the vehicles are going to have either multiple operators. So there's somebody in here driving the tank. There's another person in here, say, loading the weapons, another person maybe handling targeting, another person that's shooting. There's multiple operators inside the vehicle. Or it could be just some sort of automatic or robotic or AI targeting system. So we make the assumption, I shouldn't say make the assumption, but what you'll see with the Army list for World War II in Sci-Fi is that many of the vehicles will have the independent weapon special ability attached to them. The last thing I want to talk about is an ability we put into the game for World War II in Sci-Fi, and it's just simply called Heavy. And what that really means is, let's say we have this huge Sci-Fi walker, or even this tank, moving across the battlefield. If these guys move over here and they're armed with spears, they're not really going to damage. They're not really going to have the ability to damage that walker or that tank. So what heavy means is if the vehicle is classified as a heavy vehicle, it can only be damaged by weapons that are also classified as heavy. And the real reason we did that, well, I guess two reasons. One is the chances of somebody with a spear running up and damaging a tank is basically nil. It's not going to happen. However, if we wanted to give that chance in the game, the armor or defense value we would have to give this walker, for example, would be astronomical. So it allows us, this heavy ability allows us to kind of keep those numbers in bounds a bit. It allows us to keep them a little lower, a little easier to manage. So basically any vehicle that's classified as heavy can only be damaged by a weapon that's classified as heavy. And those would be, say, like cannons or laser cannons. Basically, when you start getting into World War II and Sci-Fi, you'll start seeing some of those heavy weapons. So briefly, that's how we handle some of the aspects of World War II and Sci-Fi in the Ages of Conflict system. I do want to point out again that the core book will have historical or ancients, fantasy, and black powder. The backgrounds, the Army list, and the equipment. And that's what this core Kickstarter campaign is designed to fund. The World War II and Sci-Fi are stretch goals. So provided we can sufficiently raise funds during the campaign, we will be providing those rules in PDF format as well. All right, thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, you're welcome to check us out on Facebook. We do have other videos, and you've heard me kind of reference a few of those. So if you haven't watched them, I recommend checking those out. Thank you.